Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Blissful Literati, where today we are going to know about a girl who will always remain little and never grow up, but at the same time will always be a lighthouse of hope and positivity. She is none other than Anne Frank, and today we will read some pages from her diary. But before we begin, let's know a little more about her. Anne Frank was born on 12th June 1929 in Frankfurt, Germany, and she died in February or March of 1945 at the tender age of 15 in Bergen-Belsen, the concentration camp in Germany. Her memoir is the only work published, and it was published under the name of The Diary of a Young Girl. Her father, Otto Frank, was the only surviving member of the family. Now let us talk about the theme of this text. The text provides an autobiographical sketch of Anne's life up to her 13th year. It gives a glimpse of life under the Nazi shadow. It shows the inner working of a teenage girl's mind and tells us the importance of a real friend in one's life. And finally, it tells us to keep a positive mind in desperate times. Now, let us take a pictographic representation of the text. Here is the diary as it is preserved in the Anne Frank Museum. Now, before we begin, let us stop for a moment and think, why should we read about a girl who had nothing to do but write a diary sitting in a dark corner and then die without any major act of rebellion? Truth be spoken, Anne was a troubled girl living in troubled times, though it can well be argued that Anne was not a troubled child to begin with. It is the troubled times that brought the change in her. Running from one bloodthirsty monster, Anne's father hid his whole family in a secret room. Anne was like Princess Rapunzel, mentally alone in a dark tower, without any fairy elements, and true evil roamed outside her castle. True, her family was with her, but they didn't really understand her. The grown ups never do they? There was no Prince Charming waiting for her but the concentration camp of Bergen-Belsen. A little girl with all her potentials, hopes, ambitions, her dreams of Hollywood, sentenced to death. And for what? Standing in today's time, where the hydra headed monster of social intolerance is showing its true nature, it will do us good to remember the impact of Hitler's ethnic cleansing. True that Anne died without a rebellion like million others, but in her death she became the face of those million others, then and even now, and her diary a testament of positivity and hope even in the darkest of times. Let us now talk about the conflict in the text. In literature, conflict signifies the struggle between two opposing forces. Conflict is that element which makes a story interesting. Think of the conflict raging in the mind of Hamlet as he faced the terrible dilemma of avenging his father's death at the cost of his mother's life. The conflict in Anne's diary is mostly internal. True, there are several conflicting situations between the people in the secret annex, and even between Anne and some of her teachers. But the one conflict which was constant was the one with her own self. It was a period of self analysis and coming to terms with her own self, a conflict that resolved with the acceptance of the girl that she was. The conflict in the selected portion just shows a glimpse of that. It is the conflict between the Anne on the outside and the Anne inside. It was a conflict where the diary came as a mediator as she found in its pages Kitty, her soulmate. There's also a minor external conflict between Anne Frank and her maths teacher, Mr. Keesing, because of Anne's continuous talking in class. However, with her ready wit, Anne overcame this conflict as well. Now, let us talk about the summary of this text. First of all, we will take a look at a lonely child. Anne got the diary as a 13th year birthday present. She is not convinced whether anyone would at all be interested in the thoughts of a little girl. However, she decides to pen down all her thoughts and emotions in the pages of the diary. She has kept many emotions pent up within herself, and the diary she planned would be their outlet. She goes on to say that despite being surrounded with people who cared for her, she was basically lonely with none to connect with soulfully. She finds in her diary, hence, a soulmate to whom she decides to bear all her emotions and names the diary Kitty. She plans to keep the musings in her diary a secret until and unless she finds a real friend. Now, let us talk about some word meanings. First of all, musings. Musings are thoughts. For example, my musings and writings on this issue do not come from the groves of academe. Academe means academics. Got all kind of things off my chest. It means to unburden worries or confess. And here indicates that she has been bottling up all her emotions and thoughts because she never could find anybody who would listen to her without passing any judgments. Paper has more patience than man. You see, people seldom can listen quietly without passing opinions. Also, their attention diverts and they have other things to do as well. Sometimes they fail to give one another time. Paper is more patient in the sense that it is always there when you need it. You can pen your thoughts and ideas and it will keep it all a secret, never passing a single comment. Paper is a silent witness. Depressed, it means unhappy or despondent. Next, listless. Listless means characterized by lack of interest, energy, or spirit. Brooding means moodily or sullenly thoughtful or serious. Stiff-backed notebook. Stiff-backed means rigidly erect. Anne is playing with words here. She compares the stiff spine of her hardcover diary with a rigid friend who will protect her secrets at all cost. It probably won't make a difference. Here we can see a note of pessimism, just a hint, as Anne feels such an occasion will never arise because she will never find a real friend. Confide means to show trust by sharing secrets. Liable means open to or subject to. Jot down means to write down. And Kitty, Anne finds a friend in her diary, one who would listen to her without complaints and names her Kitty. Now let us talk about the epistemology of loneliness. The Greek word episteme means knowledge. It basically comes from a word meaning to understand or know. So first of all, we will know the loneliness of Anne Frank. You see, the diary came to Anne as a kind of blessing. She decided to unburden herself, her emotions in the pages of diary, who, in turn, like a real friend, will be the keeper of her secrets. The question is, why diary? Why not a real person? Anne says that she was always surrounded with people and she had many friends, but none could connect to her soul. She was bored with the everyday talks and the mundane, but she could never find anyone who would listen to her feelings, her emotions uncritically, silently. This is not a problem of Anne's alone. We must remember that she was a teenager at the time, and teenagers all over the world usually go through such phases. They are at a juncture where neither the grown up world accepts them as their own, nor they themselves could fit in with the juvenile world. Their emotions are heightened and they feel things intensely. Such a phase is often susceptible to misunderstandings and rebellious attitude, both of which can be gleaned from Anne's diary. Now let us take a look at a family photograph. Anne introduces her family to her diary turned friend Kitty. Her father, Otto Frank, had married her mother Edith when he was 36 and Edith 25. Anne has an elder sister, Margot, born in 1926. Anne herself was born on 12th June 1929. She was quite attached to her grandmother. She died in 1942. Anne lit a candle in her honor on her 13th birthday. Anne was in a Montessori nursery school till she was 6. However, as the Nazis took over Holland, she had to leave that school and join a Jewish school. The other person Anne was attached to was Mrs. Cuperus, the headmistress in that Montessori school. They parted in tears. Now let us take a look at some word meanings. For example, adorable. It means extremely charming or appealing. Anne idolized her father. Emigrated. Emigrated means to leave one's place of residence or country to live elsewhere. Plunked down to mean to drop abruptly, suddenly, in a casual way. Montessori Nursery, a popular option for early education named after their founder Dr. Maria Montessori, who developed unique method and principles for teaching young children which are still followed today. Heartbreaking farewell, a tearful goodbye. This shows the attachment between a young Anne and Mrs. Cooperus, the headmistress at the Montessori school. Little celebration means no celebration at all because of Anne's grandmother's illness and operation. Solemn means sincere, marked by earnest sobriety, and dedication means setting aside for a particular purpose. Now, let us talk about the epistemology of family bonds. Let us understand the nature of family bonds. Anne may long for a real friend in her life, one who would understand her completely, listen to her without passing judgments, and keep all her secrets. But that doesn't mean she ignored what she has got. She idolizes her father and loves her mother and elder sister. She is particularly attached with her grandmother. Her passing away was a blow for Anne, and she remembered her by lighting a candle in her honor on her own birthday. Anne was blessed in her family and was showered with love, and she loved them back with all her heart. Her positivity comes from this pure love that channels through her whole being. She has a normal childhood, and like many other children outside family, she establishes a deep bonding with her class teacher in the sixth form and the headmistress of a school, Mrs. Cuperus, while Anne notes in her diary the tearful parting that they had, making their deep connection quite evident. We now also know that this parting validates the shadow of Nazi evil they were living under because Anne had to join a Jewish school as per Hitler's policy. Death had already marked them as his own. Now let's look at the Anne Frank show. We get to see Anne's entry in her diary dated June 20th, 1942. She first talks of the present day, which is also the result declaration day in her school. Anne notes the usual excitement and anticipation. She herself is a part of it. She is quite confident of her own performance. The only subject that worries her is maths. She states that she is on good terms on most of her teachers, 9 of them except Mr. Keesing, the maths teacher. Anne talks a lot in her class, and for that, Mr. Keesing gives her writing assignments. However, Anne's ready wit, imagination, and originality wins over even Mr. Keesing. She ends her entry on a positive and cheery note. Now let's take a look at some word meanings. Quaking in its boots, shaking with fear and excitement, anticipation. Forthcoming means about to appear. Pleading means a sincere entreaty. Dummies, a stupid person. Unpredictable creatures. Anne was not at all different from others, even today, in her opinion about teachers. She considers them to be most unpredictable creatures because no one can tell for sure if a teacher is going to hold a student back or promote him with grace marks. Old fogey is an old-fashioned person. Chatterbox is one who engages in much idle talk. Tucked means to cover by putting into an isolating place, like the notebook in the school bag. Rambled on means to talk or write aimlessly for long. Convincing arguments means some argument or logic which will make people believe in it. Necessity of talking means the necessity, the quality or state of being necessary that is absolutely needed. Trait is a distinguishing quality, an inherited characteristic. Inherited means to receive from an ancestor, like Anne received the talkative trait from her mother. Incorrigible means irreformable, incapable of being corrected. Ingenuity means cleverness or aptness of design. Exhausted means completely or almost completely depleted of resources or contents, used up. And ridiculous means extremely silly or unreasonable. Now let's talk about the curious case of a chatterbox. Anne appears to be a perfectly normal girl, which is how she is supposed to appear. If only Hitler had realized this fact that Christian, Aryan, Jewish, and the rest of them all are perfectly normal and equal human beings, then perhaps the most heinous ethnic cleansing of all time had never taken place. Anyway, we see Anne sitting in her classroom waiting for the results to be declared. As we all are waiting, she recounts a funny memory. Mr. Keesing, her maths teacher, was fed up with Anne and her talkativeness, so he gave her an extra assignment, an essay titled A Chatterbox, with the hope that it would make her realize how disturbing such people are. But Anne came up with her own convincing argument, and Mr. Keesing couldn't help accepting it. However, as the chit chat in the classroom continued, he gave her even more extra assignments, one after another. Not one to fall behind, Anne too came up with her own convincing and ingenious responses. She even produced an original poem on how a father swan bit his own ducklings to death simply because they quacked all the time. Instead of feeling insulted, Mr. Kissing took it in the right spirit of humor and stopped giving Anne further assignments. This goes on to show the good camaraderie between the students and the teachers and goes on to justify, to some extent, Anne's opinion about teachers being the most unpredictable creatures on earth. After all, who knew Mr. Kissing would take it so sportingly? Now we come to the serious bit, the Holocaust victims. The boys in the striped pajamas. This dress that the boys are wearing, the striped pajamas, this is synonymous with Holocaust. This is the symbol of Holocaust, just as the Star of David represents the Jewish people. And we say that God made man in his own image. Just look at these people here. Do you think this is how God looks? Do they look anywhere near God? The Holocaust. Encyclopedia Britannica defines the Holocaust as the systematic state sponsored killing of 6 million Jewish men, women, and children, and millions of others by Nazi Germany and its collaborators during the Second World War. The Germans called this the final solution to the Jewish question. Anne Frank and her family were just another family destroyed in this genocide. The Jewish people were discriminated against. They were marked by the Star of David, and all their rights were stripped away from them. Concentration camps were set up in various German occupied places. The people had to work there under inhuman conditions and then died either from exhaustion or of some diseases, or breathed their last in gas chambers where they were forced to inhale poisonous gas and die a slow, terrible death. They even built extermination camps only for the purpose of killing. The first concentration camp that was opened was called Dachau, and the most infamous of them was the camp at Auschwitz. Anne and her sister finally succumbed to their death in the Bergen-Belsen camp, while their father, Otto Frank, was rescued by the Allies from Auschwitz. Now let us take a look at this concentration camp. This is the entrance of the Auschwitz concentration camp, and on the gate it is written Arbeit macht frei. Written above the entrance to the infamous Auschwitz camp, Arbeit macht frei, or work sets you free, reeks of a grim sense of humor. The only freedom that the prisoners in these camps expected were the one where death curled them up in his lap. And now let's take a look at a gas chamber. This is how a gas chamber looked like. Those bottom corner, those were the places from where gases were sent into this chamber and the people were forced to inhale it till they would die. Now let's talk about a phenomenal woman. Many people write diaries, but not all of them become as famous as Anne did. Even Anne didn't think of publishing a diary. not when she began to confide her musings to her dearest friend Kitty. It came later when she heard a broadcast urging people to record their lives under the Nazi rule. Then she decided to rewrite her diary in the form of a novel. She believed she can be a good writer and she wanted the world to see her diary. When Otto Frank published the memoir as Anne Frank, the diary of a young girl, he was honoring his daughter's final wishes. The diary presents the working of a mature, sensitive, and insightful mind and an intimate examination of daily life under Nazi occupation and is tinged with self awakening. She believed, despite everything, people are really good at heart. Such pure and calm positivity in the most wretched and disgraceful of times is what makes Anne a really phenomenal woman. Now let us have some thoughts on the title. The narrative presents before us some pages from the diary of Annalise Mary Anne Frank. That's Anne Frank. We get to know the reason behind her decision to maintain a diary and her family even, though in a brief manner. Finally, we also see her in her classroom and get a glimpse of her camaraderie, which is a spirit of good fellowship with her teachers. Since the diary plays a key role in disseminating means to broadcast or circulate, disseminating all this information and in providing us with a glimpse in the life of Anne Frank, its acknowledgement in the title is justified. Now, before we finish, let's take a look at the person herself, Anne Frank, as she sits to write her diary. Here we have some lines by the great poet John Keats. When old age shall this generation waste, thou shalt remain in midst of other woe than ours, a friend to man to whom thou sayest, beauty is truth, truth, beauty. That is all ye know on earth and all you need to know. Thank you.